Hi everyone, my name is Benedikt. I get to run a conference that is almost as cool as DLD. We have less hoodies, a little more gray hair and more uniforms, but we're trying to catch up to this super creative crowd. You see, the cool thing about DLD is, when I was asked to moderate a panel, I asked what it was about, and they said, geopolitics. And then the next time I looked, it was about the next generation of superhuman machines. So please take whatever I say with a grain of salt. I'm definitely not an expert. But in true democratic style, this panel has decided that we are going to ignore the title per se, and we talk about the geopolitical aspects of what is behind the next generation of superhuman machines. You see, you've heard a lot about artificial intelligence over the last day and a half. You've heard virtually everything there is to hear about artificial intelligence. Just one thing is missing, and that's sort of the geopolitics of it all. And we hope to bring that in with great perspectives from the research world, the business sector, and academia. See, at the Munich Security Conference, it's only 4 weeks away, allow me that little advertorial, geotech competition will play a huge role. 5G, critical infrastructure like Nord Stream 2 will be all over our conference and the news. But one thing that is really at the core of it all is geotech competition when it comes to AI. And let me quote Putin, and I never thought that would ever happen to me, but Putin said, whoever is going to rule AI in 2030 is going to rule the world in 2100. So with that sort of pretty drastic quote, what we are going to do is to look where are the others, and what can the various sectors do to make sure that this rise of superhuman machines is going to be comparable to the steam engine, electrification, or the rise of information technology, and will not be the next Manhattan Project. And we at the Munich Security Conference believe that there's a huge risk that it may actually go in the latter direction rather than the former. So let me begin with you, Mykel. We've heard a lot about AI, but maybe you can give us a super brief reminder what we are going to talk about. Tell us where we stand as the West and where the others stand as the rest. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So maybe I'll start with a definition of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is just the generation of behavior that we think is intelligent. So this could be like playing chess or recognizing pictures of people and images. AI is divided into 3 areas, roughly. So one area is perception. So that's how do we go from sensor input or images or LiDAR data or whatever into an understanding of the world. Major advances have been made in this area recently. Another area is language, so natural language processing. We can now talk to our phones, and for the most part, they understand us. A lot better than they did at least 10 years ago. And then a third area, which is my area of research, which is autonomy and decision making. So how do you take an understanding of this world and arrive at decisions like how do we fly our aircraft, how do we trade our money, how do we drive autonomous vehicles and so forth. And major advances have been made in that area. But going back to your question, where do we stand versus the others? And from my perspective as an academic, there is no we and others. It's just we, right? So you want to know where my some of my best students come from? They come from countries like Iran, China, Russia. And the quality of a research program, at least a university research program, is measured by how well the diversity of the members reflect the diversity of the world. And that's incredibly important. But to answer your question directly, like where does the US stand versus like Europe and China, Stanford, in collaboration with others, put together what's called the AI Index. And this is publicly available. You can find the 2019 report online. Came out just last month. So now China and Europe are about tied, and that exceeds the number of publications of coming from the United States. However, there are more citations coming from the United States. So they're cited about 50% more often. We have also seen a major explosion in participation at conferences. So the AI Index reports on various quantitative metrics. One metric is attendance at machine learning conferences. So one conference is the NeurIPS conference. This past year, there were 13,500 participants. So compared to 2012, that's a 800% increase. And you can see some of these other metrics in that report.
Thank you so much. I'm still trying to figure out whether I should be super happy about the fact that your best students come from Iran and Russia and China, or whether that sort of plays to the point that there is an inherent problem or risk, at least, in that. Sabine, China has a plan when it comes to AI. China is the only country in the world that defines its AI strategy as opposed to other countries. It wants to be better, it wants to do more. The European Union and countries in the European Union define it in a more national context. What do they want to achieve, not as opposed to others? But do we really have a plan? Are we ambitious enough? And does Airbus have a plan?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So let me start as well with a couple of examples and where we stand, first of all, as a company, but then look a little bit further as well into the European area. So if you look at facts, then from an Airbus standpoint, I have to say digitalization has really fully gripped aerospace. And here it's beyond national frontiers, as you say. If we look at an aircraft today, not modern aircraft, then we are processing 10 gigabytes of data every hour, every flying hour. If you look at a whole commercial aircraft fleet of 40,000, then we come easily to over 400 terabytes every hour. And if you just compare that to Facebook, 2.3 billion people, users, then we process about 500 terabytes a day. So just to give the relations. So that's about pure volume of data. And looking at this, for sure, it's clear that the digital era and the data processing era is fully there. And if you look at just a couple of examples, and you gave the 3 areas of artificial intelligence, I would just say, yes, Airbus has always, in some areas we've been for decades, like just taking an image from space, you always needed to process it. So this was always done with intelligence. Today, we would go much farther into putting real intelligence in what we do with the data, not just providing an image, but providing information. Deforestation, for instance. What happened over a day, a month, a year. And this is what our customers are after, for instance. Or the second one was about, I think it was language processing. If you just take a pilot in a cockpit and the conversations which are going on with the different sectors, like just an air traffic controller, how often is it noisy? Is it difficult to understand? And if we can help here just by giving additional information, for instance by text, but being able to recognize accents of all the different languages around, because English is not just English, as we all know. This is one of the fields where we are very active. But also for sure predictive maintenance. So if we can say whenever we need to change an equipment in an aircraft before it's actually on the ground, and we all know this situation, we are sitting there waiting and something technical is wrong. Whenever we can predict that, because we make use of these terabytes of data which are available, then it's a real value to the final customer, be it the airline or the actual user. So there are areas where we've always, where we make a lot of usage of what's out there. But if you ask me, where do we stand and is there a European strategy or a German or French, then I have to say, no, we are years away from a Chinese clear strategy where to go with artificial intelligence and in a very homogeneous environment. Or American era where we have to say all the technology today is coming from there. And everything we use as commercial technology that we can use is coming from there. In Europe, we have to say we are in a very heterogeneous environment, be it from customer side, and here I'm talking more about the defense and the space area, be it from an industrial standpoint. And this is really where we think we have to get over it and to use future opportunities to really catch up and build something common and far bigger. Because if we talk about defense, security relevant areas like just securing, let's say, key industrial environments, being at a nuclear power station, then it's all about sovereignty as well. And this is really where we have to think about. And then it's all about not public clouds, but private clouds. What do we do with this data? It's all of a sudden very relevant to have control about that data and know that we have it under control. And this is actually what we have to build. And I think the geopolitical area has given us a situation where this is getting more and more conscious in our European political portfolio as well.
Thank you. Let me just follow up on one thing that you said. You said that we have to catch up. The thing about artificial intelligence is that you can't leapfrog. You actually have to catch up to overtake eventually. And let me go back to my first question. Airbus may be doing its bit, but let's look at the European Union, and we'll hear the European Commissioner in 17 minutes and 8 seconds give us his view on this. Are we doing enough? Are we ambitious enough as Europe? And is the way that Airbus was designed as a European champion, is that applicable to the world of artificial intelligence?
So on one hand, again, some figures. I think in the US or in China, we are about 200 billion of invest into AI a year. If you look at the European environment, that's 3 billion, which was given, finally 500 million used. So that's just a drop. Yeah, so with this, there is no way in going anywhere. On the other hand, I really believe in, for instance, programs, new defense opportunities and new defense programs which have been set up, like the Future Combat Air System, where we are talking about a much wider horizon than just, do we have the right fighter for the upcoming, let's say, environment, or in order to keep a safe world and keep up with it. It's about a huge system and really connecting all the different assets which might be there, and this is coping with the heterogeneous environment in Europe. We don't have one homogeneous block of knowing where we go. And this is actually what we have to build. So from an industrial standpoint, and you said, yes, Airbus is one of the examples of a truly European company going into a global world, but with European DNA. Do we have that in a political environment today? Not always. We see starting points, which are very good, because I think Europe is waking up. On the other hand, we see all the different nations having very singular interests and which are coming in front. And this is actually where we have to work from both sides, customer side and industry side, in terms of consolidation, building a common vision, and bring these things forward.
Thank you. Over to you, Dirk, as an Air Force soldier, a former Air Force soldier, which I will not hold against you as an Army officer.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, now being responsible for defense and security research at DLR, the German Aerospace Center, what worries you about this geopolitical, this geotech competition when it comes to AI?
So, thank you for the question. I mean, you quoted already Putin when he said that the leader in AI will probably rule the world, and I think that statement is not too far from reality. I think it's not too long ago that Elon Musk and more than 100 tech leaders sent a petition to the United Nations saying that the implementation of AI technologies and of autonomy technologies within the military environment will be somehow the third revolution of warfare, besides the development of gunpowder and nuclear weapon systems. I wouldn't agree 100% with that statement, but I do think it's not too far from reality, because if you think about security and, for example, how deterrence works, in the way that you say, okay, if you do that to me, I do the same for you, and you may not be willing to take the consequences. That's very roughly how deterrence works. And if you would have an individual nation being really the champion on artificial intelligence, implementing these technologies into a military environment, and generating all the opportunities that are behind it, then you would probably have a situation where you really have a destabilizing factor when it comes to deterrence, what would have an impact on the global security architecture.
Thank you. I mean, we've had many discussions on issues like hypersonic weapons and how artificial intelligence makes it possible to have missiles that fly at 7 times the speed of previous weapon systems. I mean, there is this huge threat environment out there. So before we go back to the doom and gloom of that, let me just go back to academia and sort of the bright light of the Russian, the Iranian, the Chinese student.
Also European and American. I love all of my students
that,
equally, by the way.
Yes. No, but you know, what do you see as the role of academia in that sort of the geopolitical competition that there is, that one cannot ignore, that one must not ignore, and that, I mean, will you remain, or do you want to remain, the sort of the ivory tower that just delivers brilliant research and then really doesn't think about what it's going to be used for and how it's going to be used? Or do you see a role in a sort of a more enlightened Platonian sense?
Great question. So Stanford did a long-range planning process that involved the input of faculty across all of the disciplines, actually. And one of the outcomes of that was the establishment of the Human-Centered AI Institute. And this brings together academics from law, from computer science, all across the board, medicine. And it's with the realization that we do need to think carefully about how these technologies will unfold in society. And how, especially with artificial intelligence, how do we make sure that AI embodies human values? Another major challenge is understanding how AI works, how to make sure that it's robust when it's deployed. And we want any nation that's contemplating the use of AI to understand its bounds, like where can it be trusted, where can it not currently? How do you go about analyzing these systems to make sure that they're safe? And I think academia can play an incredibly important role.
And what do you need? What does academia need? What do you need from national governments, from the startup community? I mean, what are the sort of the 2-3 things that you really need to play that enlightened role?
So I'm from the School of Engineering, so I'm approaching many of these questions from an engineering perspective. What's really useful to me especially is to know how these AI systems will be used and under what kinds of parameters. Will a human be in the loop? Like, will it be providing guidance to a human? Or will a human be on the loop? So the system will be performing autonomously, but a human can intervene. And the placement of the human and the interaction with the human operator or a network of operators, it's really important to have an understanding of that when you go about engineering the system as a whole.
Okay, speaking of engineering, I mean, we have 2 engineering experts. Where is the human in the loop or on the loop in your Airbus and DLR projects?
For us, it's key that the human is on the loop and is really in control of the actions which are done. I think this is, at least today and for a decent future, still not imaginably differently. So that's key. But what we also think is that in the complexity of the technology we are in, an aircraft, flying an aircraft, or having a fleet of flying taxis in the future, we need to have systems to decently help them, help the human, help the pilot to take the right decisions, help the overall traffic controller to take the right decisions. And this is what we need to do with the technology. So then questions like certification, like robustness, like verification of these softwares are coming into play. And this is where we really have to do steps in the future, be it in the commercial area or in the security relevant area.
Thanks. Dirk, in the non-NATO top secret cosmic projects that you do, where is the human?
Actually, I cannot agree more from what Sabine said. It's definitely the human on the loop. For most of the things, you cannot have the human in the loop anymore because the process itself should be autonomous or operated by an artificial intelligence somehow. But you always need at least the human on the loop. And you should never discuss that away. It's, I think, from our perspective, essential. And if you have some applications in mind, for example, air defense, and you already talked about hypersonic weapon systems, which dramatically shorten the time available, the decision-making time, there cannot be a human in the loop anymore. The system itself needs to take somehow a decision where an operator on the loop can say yes or no. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
I hope you realize that's where we went back to the topic of superhuman machines. Let me just sort of ask a last round. What does industry need from the European Union? You know, if you could now go over to the next room and ask Commissioner Breton, what would you ask him for?
So we really think that Europe has to catch up, and specifically in the field of data management, data storage, data analytics power. And this is why we think that Europe needs a program like FCAS, like the Future Air Combat System, in order to give a frame, in order to really give a frame for industry to emerge here and to go forward. Our view of the things is, in order to be quick, you can not just rebuild anything, and nobody today could claim to invest as much as the GAFAs do. They have 10, 12 billion a year to actually bring the technology forward. So this is why our answer is to start with a hybrid environment where we actually rely on commercial techniques, but then the intelligence, we need to build private stacks, private clouds, in order to have controlled, restricted data access, to have data sovereignty, and to be sure that the intelligence is kept in a sovereign manner. And this is actually how we approach the system, to start having something accessible quickly, but then as well, through programs like European defense programs, be able to build the necessary environment for academia in Europe and startups and others to actually build the next generation of the things.
Thanks. Dirk, if you could ask one thing from the German government for the German Aerospace Center when it comes to the rise of superhuman machines, what would you ask for?
I would actually ask for a similar thing that Sabine asked for, to prepare the right boundary conditions, I would say, so that industry, academia, and research organizations can actually work closely together. From my perspective, we do not have the right mechanisms in place to realize that. We have a lot of individual entities and facilities working AI, but working it under a common framework, a common picture. That's something we are missing.
Thank you. And because I promised the organizers that we'll finish perfectly on time, a last round of 1 minute each. We'll be back at DLD next year, hopefully. What do you think are the most likely developments from now till the next DLD summit when it comes to the rise of superhuman machines and the geopolitics of it all? Mykel.
Yeah, so I think we've already seen massive growth in terms of perception and natural language, fueled, of course, by deep learning and neural networks. I think the most exciting developments will be in the areas of decision-making and autonomy. One of the challenges with that is that when you have the capability of superhuman decision-making, there's often the question, is the system just so unbelievably intelligent and we're so cognitively limited that that its decisions do not match ours? Is it due to a bug, or is it because the AI is just so smart? And I think we'll be wrestling
about Excel
with
every
that.
single day.
Yeah. So I think that will be really important. Another thing that I think will start emerging is broader education of the general public about AI. what it is, what it can do. And it's unbelievably important. It's just like when email started to become widely used. People needed some basic education, like not to click on links that people send to you who you don't know, or maybe even people that you do know, and not run attachments and basic things like that. I think that will be very important in the coming years.
Okay. Dirk, over to you.
Yeah, I think we will not see a big revolution within the next year, but obviously incremental progress. I personally hope that we would work on the trust part that was already mentioned by you, Mykel, because that's something that's still missing. We are working the technology part, but how we build trust in technology and how trust in AI, that's not fully addressed. And now a second hope, I hope that some more human intelligence would come into place.
Sabine, last word to you.
Let me start with a quote. In the 1st century, one of the Roman senators was very famous at the time, Sextus Julius Frontius. He said, "Inventions have long since reached their limit, and I see no hope for further development." So, obviously, we see it completely different. In Airbus, we pioneer sustainable aerospace for a safe and united world. So, we are really a truly global company with a European DNA. We represent and spread the ideals of cooperation and break barriers, and we need Europe to support us in this journey. And my true belief is, in a year from now, we are at a good start for the next future programs in order to catch up in Europe.
Thank you so much. We've now had 27 minutes and 32 seconds of the rise of superhuman machines and the geopolitics of it. If you want to hear about the little things that we have left out, you might as well tune in to the forthcoming Munich Security Conference in exactly 4 weeks. www.securityconference.de. I'll probably never get invited back to DLD for having just done this. There will be a lot about the geopolitical aspects of artificial intelligence and the role of countries like China, Russia, and the US, and where Europe stands in it. We look forward to discussions online with you, and thank you to a great panel, and enjoy the rest of your day here at DLD. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.